Welcome back. Right, let me play a pattern for you. Let me take this out. I've laid down a very simple kick drum pattern here using Nephaton, which is, of course, one of my favorite synthesizers, and I think it's the best 808 emulator out there, bar none. So all I've done is just run off some notes, nothing too exciting. Let me just play it for you. Now this is how the 808 sounds coming out the box, no processing. Of course that's a bit boring, so I then threw in some. Let me show it to you. And basically I've modulated the sweep function here. Keep an eye on this knob, you'll see it turn as we progress along the sequence. I just wanted to give it a little bit of expression so we could actually enjoy ourselves instead of trying to stick a pencil in our eye to distract us. Right, now I want you to listen to all of this without any processing, as we have been doing. Keep an eye on the levels as well. And I'll bring in each process one at a time. First in the process is the dynamic EQ from Tokyo Dawn Labs. One of my favorite products, I have to be honest. I love dynamic EQs because we can add expression now to, instead of just sort of picking a bandwidth and boosting or cutting it. We can have that act as variable. By doing that, we set up the EQ to behave like a compressor. In other words, we have a threshold, a ratio, an attack, a release. And this is kind of makeup gain, but it's not. Makeup gain is handled here, but I'll explain it as we go along. So what we need to do first off is have a listen to this and see how this behaves. If I drag the gain to negative values, you see what we're doing there? We're pushing it further down, quieter, instead of picking a positive value like we've done here. And now you can actually hear the attack transients of that kick and the body swell. Important thing here is where we set the threshold. I don't want to have this dynamic processing. I don't want to have this dynamic processing taking place on the entire signal, just parts of it. I want to give it that bounce. Ratio, don't go crazy. Seriously, we'll take care of the bounce with the limiter, but you do want some movement. So we've now got that kind of undulating bounce going on here. Critical here is attack and release. If I take release all the way down, you're hearing it distort. So find a happy medium. If you go too high, you'll see this boost or drop. The threshold will be activated, but you just won't have enough time to come back and grab it again. So find the happy medium whereby you've got full-on undulating movement. I found about anywhere from about 50 to about 80. This is also dependent when you set your attack. Can you hear the attack transients there? I don't like that at all. So what I do is I extend the attack to let the attack transients through and swell up the body. So far so good. Let's bring down the output gain a bit because we're going to use the limiter to create the bounce. So without it, it's quite a static sound, no real dynamic motion in it. Next up, I put in the La Petite Exciter from Fine Cut Bodies. I've used this before in a number of tutorials. It's a freebie. It's not the most elegant or the most detailed exciter, but it does the job. In previous tutorials, I've explained how this works, and I've set this up really with a low input. I'm mainly exciting the low frequencies here, but not too much whereby you get that boom. I've pushed in a little bit of high just to hear that sort of clicky attack of the 808. Output I've pretty much left where it is. Instigated noise floor, although to be honest, I can't hear much difference with that. CV I do like. This is, think of this as a transient smoothing knob. In effect, I'm now smoothing out the low and high frequencies that I'm exciting. If you don't, sometimes they can be very brash. So we've now got the dynamic EQ feeding the exciter. Finally, we want the weapon of choice, which is one of the limiters I always use for dynamic motion. If I want a limiter that just limits, my favorite is PSP Xenon. If I want a limiter that behaves like a dynamic tool, I use this. You can already hear what it's done to the sound. Right, first thing, let's start with transparent. Look ahead at 0, attack at 0, release at 0, transients at 0, linking at 0. Right. Transparent for me, the best way to test these is just to push up the gain knob. You can hear that is very muffly. It's just too much, way too much, and I'm not really even boosting. I like, with 808s, I find dynamic and punchy are the best. Punchy is too much. It's not something we really want with an 808. However, if I throw it in dynamic, then yeah, we're getting drops, lifts. Next up, I want a bit of look ahead on this because I found it needed to analyze the audio. Attack is really down to you. Do you want to limit the entire signal? I don't. I like to limit beyond the attack. Can you hear how we got that nice little air just before that 808 kicks in? Release, if it's too short like it is here, you're not going to get a good grab on the attack. So extend this. If you extend it too far, you're not going to have enough time to pick it back up again. So find a happy medium. The transient tool, again, we've covered this in other tutorials. I find that particularly with mono sounds, I like to use it because it does some weird things to the attack transient. In some ways, it smooths it out. That's a very central sound if you want it, but I find a little bit of motion is nice. The release itself is a real weapon. That stereo links the release, and depending on what value you pick, you'll get different musical things happening. It really is not hit and miss, but you have to play around to find the right sound and use your ears. Use your ears. This isn't something you're really going to see displayed in the graphical representation. Once you've done that, click your ISP button and set this minus 0.01 as your ceiling. That way we will never clip. I can now push this to the point of distortion and I'm still not clipping. With 808s, I find around here anywhere from 3 to about 6 is wonderful. Let's drag this down a bit. Get the release to float around left to right and keep the transients a bit more central. Now is the chance where you can start to model this response. And this is your weapon. I think this graphical display is wonderful. It really explains how things are behaving for me. And you can see it in real time each time you move a knob. Maybe we need to push this a little. Let's bring the release in a bit so we get a bit more of that sort of bouncy swell, and you can see that happening already. And now we can push it even further. Sounds lovely. Too hard. That's nice. So we've gone from this. Keep your eye on the gain values here. I think this is around minus 10, minus 10. I've added 10 dB here, but in effect I've actually pushed it way beyond that. And now we've got this nice little bounce thing happening. If at any point you want to play around, feel free to. This is a bit too well behaved. Anyway, play around till you've got the right taste, the right vibe. Well, I hope that helped you. It's all about taste, really. Try and get your dynamics sorted at the start of your signal path. Then use the exciter, then the limiter. You could use the exciter after the limiter if you don't want the excitation to sound too harsh. But I find that with just the right amount of bounce and settings within, say, the Pro L, you can get a lovely dynamic feel to the excited frequencies.